Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video I'm going to be showing you how to shoot simple video clips using your Canon R camera. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do it with the Canon R7, but all these principles are going to remain consistent across any of the Canon R bodies that you may have. R6 Mark II, R6, whatever you have, this is going to help you, so stay tuned. Okay guys, so a couple of things that we want to go over real quick. Do you want to shoot in C-Log or don't you? Now, shooting in C-Log is going to provide you with the best possible image quality that you can get out of your camera. That's going to be 10-bit footage. It's going to be a flatter profile, meaning it's going to look kind of desaturated. You will need to do some color reproduction in post, so there's going to be more work associated with this footage, but LUTs can go a very long way in helping you correct your colors. So it's not that hard, but you do need to have a little bit of knowledge. Otherwise, you'll choose to not shoot in C-Log, and you will then be shooting in 8-bit footage where you will have the colors put in there from the get using your color profiles. But you will have less flexibility in terms of white balance or color editing in post-production. So the first decision you want to make is whether you want to shoot in C-Log 10-bit or you don't and you want to take the 8-bit footage for what it is. 8-bit footage can come out very good, you just don't have flexibility in post-production like you would 10-bit footage. Now, if I wanted to shoot 4K, 24 frames a second, let's dive into the menus here. What we would do is just go into our frame rate setting. We're gonna go in there, we're going to set that to 23.98p, and that is your 24 frames per second. Now, when you are trying to figure out what shutter speed you should be at, there's a rule for that when you shoot video. It's called the 180-degree shutter rule, and what that means is your shutter speed should pretty much always be as close to double whatever the frame rate that you're shooting. So if we're shooting a 24 frames per second clip, I need to go ahead and set my shutter speed to 1/50th of a second. Now, 1/50th of a second at 24 frames a second, if I chose to use auto ISO, which a lot of people like to do, the lowest ISO that you're going to have available is ISO 800. And because of this, shooting at 1/50th of a second, the lowest ISO value I have when using auto ISO is ISO 800. And I'm shooting at 24 frames per second, even at f8 with a very dark lens like this, I'm overexposed. And I would need to go to f22 or even more stop down than that to get an accurate exposure. And this is where ND filters are going to come into play. You need to use ND filters to be able to correctly set your shutter speed, depending on what frame rate you're using, to get an accurate exposure, especially if you want to take advantage of auto ISO, where the ISO can change for you while the scene changes. Your lowest ISO value that you're going to have available when shooting in C-Log is going to be ISO 800. And that's because the most dynamic range can be captured at ISO 800, and that's why when shooting C-Log they want you to be at no lower than ISO 800. So when all of these things come into play, this is why ND filters are very, very important. But let's move on. Let's say you wanted to shoot 4K 60. Now, 24 frames per second, like what I just explained to you, that's like the scene that you're watching now. Everything's happening in real time, and I want you to see that recorded at the speed that I'm recording it at. I don't want you to see me in slow motion while I'm talking. But if I was recording wildlife, or I was shooting some kind of B-roll that I intended to possibly slow the footage down, the type of thing that you would see music laid on, you see it kind of dreamy and slow motion, these are usually shot at 60 frames per second. And so what we would do is just, again, dive into the menu here. We're gonna go into the frame rate settings, and we're just going to change that to 59.94p, and that is our 60 frames per second. Now again, 180-degree shutter rule, we need to make sure that we are adhering to that, so the shutter speed would be set to 1/125th of a second, making it as close to double 60 frames per second as I can. So again, auto ISO, because I want to take advantage of auto ISO, is set to ISO 800 at the lowest, which means I need to be at f11, not even, f16, not even, f22, and I can get an accurate exposure. But again, if I had an ND filter, this is where I would put it on my lens to then cut the light out from getting into my sensor and allow me to get accurate exposures with more wide open apertures. White balance, the one thing I'm going to say about that is try to pick one and stick with it when you start shooting. Don't use auto white balance. It will change on you even in the same scene, making it extremely difficult to try to get an accurate or at least a consistent white balance through your entire project. So I would say don't use auto white balance. Stick with whatever white balance you have. This is why C-Log is very handy. I prefer to shoot in 10-bit C-Log because you will be able to correct your white balance much more significantly than if you'll be stuck with the colors that you get out of your 8-bit footage. Anyway, guys, I don't want to get too complicated too quickly. I think this is going to be enough for you to kind of get started with your Canon R cameras and shooting video. If you like videos like this, please do think about going below, liking, subscribing, and clicking that notification bell, and I'll see you on my next video.